Welcome, everyone, to Voices of Crested Butte, past and present. My name is Melinda Holm. I am the Executive Director of the Crested Butte Museum. Thank you for attending our exciting new program. We have a live audience and we're streaming live to you via Zoom. Since we have significantly increased our oral interviews of our old timers, we realized we needed to capture the stories and the valuable information from our mid-timers. I discussed this idea with Dwayne, and we came up with this theme for our 4-part series. We're turning the table on those who have made a profession of capturing the stories here in our valley and having them recorded for our generations to come. These recordings will be featured on our YouTube page called Crested Butte Mountain Heritage Museum for all to enjoy. If you like this concept, please consider making a contribution to the museum or a donation to help us continue. It's because of you and your donations made by everyone and your memberships and you attending our different events and shopping in our store, we can continue these programs. Visit CrestedButteMuseum.com for more information. Now on with today's show. We have Dwayne Vandenbush interviewing George Sibley.
George, thanks very much for being here. You are one of the best known people in all of the Gunnison country, and what a career you've had, from freelance writer to author to forest fighter to living in Gothic for a winter to newspaper editor and the originator of Flauschink. That last one may be the most important one. Anyway, if you look over our shoulder, we got a couple of George's books here. Here's a tremendous book that he did called Water Wranglers: The History of the Colorado Water District, River Water District. And here's another one called Dragons in Paradise. And he also did another great one called Part of a Winter, which we'll get into, when he spent a winter in Gothic, like Billy Barr, kind of 4 winters in Gothic. Thank you, George. So, George, the first thing I'd like to have you do is tell us a little bit about your history, where you came from, what brought you to Crested Butte, and what it was like back then.
Okay. I was born in Western Pennsylvania, but Marta knows what I'm going to say next. I was conceived in Colorado by 2 Colorado natives, so I consider myself something of a native, somewhat. But I spent the first 20-some years of my life and went to college in Pennsylvania. But then I came back to Colorado and have been here ever since, and been here twice as long as I was in Pennsylvania. So when people ask me where I grew up, I like to say I grew up in Crested Butte, beginning at the age 25. But that I got here in 1966, and that was the year that Crested Butte had just come out of a bankruptcy proceeding and a financial reorganization. They announced that they were opening in November. They made the announcement in November that they would be opening at Thanksgiving, they hoped, which is pretty short notice for publicizing a ski season and all of that. At the time, I was basically ski bumming. I had spent the previous winter after college and an interesting episode with the United States Army that we won't go into. I had come to the mountains, and I'd spent the previous winter doing mops and slops at the Loveland ski area in return for the opportunity to ski mornings, plus $60 a month in room and board. And the only thing I did that year that seemed to be indicative of somebody looking for a future was take a first aid class, because I was told by a member of the ski patrol at Loveland that, and he's the one who taught the class too, that was what you needed to get on a ski patrol, was a first aid card. Now, anybody on the ski patrol, I hope there's nobody on the ski patrol here today, would be astounded at that. You basically have to be an EMT at this point, and you also have to be a good skier. I'd had 1 year of skiing mornings at Loveland and thought I was an okay skier. And I had my first aid card. I had lined up a job in Aspen at that point, bussing tables and, starting at the bottom. Hadn't that place to live. And when I saw the notice in the Rocky Mountain News down in Denver, where I was doing construction work at the time, I immediately came to Crested Butte to see if I could get some kind of a job. And I met with Vic Dennis, the mountain manager, and said, I'd really like to be on the ski patrol, but I'm just looking for work. And said, well, we need people on the ski patrol. And he didn't even ask if I could ski. He was, what I found out later was that there had been erratic and sometimes no payment at the end of the previous year. And nobody in the valley wanted to work for the ski resort because they figured they were broke last year. They've just done a reorganization and they're probably still broke. And so I was able to get a job on the Crested Butte Ski Patrol without them even knowing whether or not I could ski, which I couldn't do as well as I should have been able to be on a ski patrol. But because they'd had such a inauspicious start for the season, there were so few people around that there were very few accidents, and it didn't matter that I was doing on-the-job training skiing as well as.
Now, when you came in 67, the mine had closed in 66. The mine had closed in 52. Railroad tracks out in 55. High school going down to Gunnison, 67. Ski area bankrupt. Mm-hmm. What was Crested Butte like in the 1960s?
Well, at that time, it was bumping along the bottom for sure. The people, there were still a number of what we called old timers then. And when Melinda called me an old timer, I immediately flashed on the fact that Betty Spahar had told me once that you'll never be an old timer, George. You might be an old new timer, but you'll never be an old timer. But I guess when you outlast all the old timers, you become an old timer.
That's right. Yeah.
At any rate, there were a number of old timers around. A lot of them were retired miners who thought that John L. Lewis was God come to earth because they had retirement. And the few business people who had businesses that they couldn't leave. Sturika's Frankengal Sturika, Tony Stefanik, Tony Mihalik, wonderful people that had wanted the town to become a mining town again. They wanted the mines back. They worked hard to get the Sarco here to run the Keystone Mine. And it was kind of running off and on. It's a very tricky mine with a lot of faulted veins in it. Mm-hmm. And they'd mine for a week and the vein would shift up there or over there or somewhere else. And they'd be back at R&D. But they had also asked to be listed as a ski resort. And in the early 60s, Dick Eflin and Fred Rice had come in to do a ski area on Crested Butte Mountain. Unfortunately, at exactly the same time that Vail was starting on a much more accessible place.
What prompted you to buy and run a newspaper when there was hardly anybody in town?
Well, because I knew absolutely nothing about newspapering. This was a time when you could do that kind of thing. You could become a restaurateur or a newspaper owner, an operator, or a tow truck operator. because anybody who knew anything about those things was too smart to come to a place with a population of 300. And but I was hanging out with a crowd of people, including people like Gene Martin, who was a retired Marine colonel turned jeweler. Carol Morganson, who was running a retired accountant, who was running a lodge, the Elk Mountain Lodge, and Art Norris, who was a business professor at Western State College, and some other new people around, like Barbara Kotz, who was running a wood carving business. Another instance of somebody getting into something because you could, because nobody who in their right mind would do it instead. And that group of people thought that, there was a sense in the town that the 20th century had abandoned us, that the ski area was barely creeping along. The mining had gone. They'd taken the mine out and taken the railroad tracks out with the mine. And it was a kind of a sense that the 20th century had abandoned us and that our future was ours. We could become anything we wanted to become. We decided we wanted to become. And we loved the town as it was, and immediately set about doing everything we could to change it. That's what love is, isn't it? I love you now. How can I change
and a
you?
paper was one of the things that
And a paper was one of the things we decided we needed, because we needed to get the word out, and there was an audience to get the word out to. The Crested Butte Chronicle was already in existence. It had come into existence with the ski area. The ski area had taken it over at one point because the editor wasn't making any money off of it for the obvious reasons. And then when the ski area went bankrupt, the printer inherited it for lack of paid bills. And so the paper was available for sale, and it did have a mailing list of around 300 people, most of whom didn't live in town, most of whom lived around the state. So it was, we had more people living in Oklahoma and Texas on the mailing list than we did in Crested Butte. But at any rate, it seemed like a good way to reach out to people. And we didn't have anybody that knew anything about journalism, but I always wanted to be a writer. And
how long did you have the paper, George?
I had the paper for 3.5 years.
One other question I wanted to ask you, when you came in here, I got the old timers who are here, and then the new people began to come in. What was that relationship like early?
It was good. It was a good relationship right up until about the summer of 1970, the late 60s. The old timers knew they needed people around. They weren't wildly enthusiastic about people like myself, but if we sat and listened to their stories, which I loved to do in the bar, evenings, late afternoons, and bought an occasional round, we were fine. And it was a good relationship. I felt like we were learning a lot from them, as well as them getting a sense of what was coming down the pike.
What changed in 1970?
1970 was just an inundation of hippies, new young people.
Trust funders?
Some trust funders, but it was more, had people wandering down the streets with knives that long hanging off their belts, and they're carrying rifles around, and it made them, it was too much. It was just too much. A lot of them were really good people too. I think Sue came that summer, didn't you, in 70? 69 or 70.
Susan Anderton, he's looking at him
Yeah, Susan Anderson.
in the back.
And
George, another question I wanted to ask you is, there's always, since I've been here, there's always been a division between Gunnison and Crested Butte.
mhm.
Did you notice that then, and do you notice that now? And if you do, what's changed?
I noticed it then. There were 3 newspapers in Gunnison at that time: the News Champion, the Courier, and the Globe. And they loved writing bad things about Crested Butte. So I, of course, retaliated by writing bad things about the bad things they were writing about. But I remember trying to sell advertising down there, going into Ross Blackstock's store and asking if he would like to advertise in the Chronicle. And why would I want to do that? Okay, well, that was kind of it was definitely, Gunnison was a different town then than it is now, in large part, I think, because so many people who would rather live in Crested Butte have been somewhat forced to live in Gunnison. And
Do you see that division still today?
it still exists to some extent today. It's less. It is a lot less. And it's probably inevitable that it will continue to be. Crested Butte, Colorado has a cultural divide about 8,000 feet elevation. Above that, it's blue Democrats. Used to be working class Democrats, like the miners were Democrats. And now it's amenities Democrats. But fundamentally, below that has always been agriculture, conservative, and the below 8,000 feet has always depended on above 8,000 feet economically more than it liked to. The big taxpayers in Gunnison County were the mines, I mean.
That's a terrific thought. I never thought of it that way, that elevation made a difference with the different parties. I want you to tell us, there's all kinds of great stories about you and Chuck Wirtz and Art North sitting in a bar, and there was no end to the ski season. So you guys get to come up with an end of the ski season. Tell us a little bit about that.
January in Crested Butte, as probably most of you who live here know, can make you a little crazy. Especially if it's a snowy January and you want it, but and there aren't as many people around. It's not sure you're going to have a successful season yet, but I had kind of felt like doing a ski season, for a town to put together a ski season, for people to come and have a good time in one of the most treacherous environments you can conceive of, and places where people barely survive, even if they aren't trying to entertain the masses. And I thought, it's a big deal. And you get to the end of it, there ought to be some kind of an acknowledgement that, by God, we've done it, we've survived it, and here we still are, and it's going to be spring, so we ought to have a big party.
Whose idea was that? Yours or a combination of all three of you?
Well, we were sitting around complaining about that, and complaining about January too, because there was really nothing. There was really nothing.
What bar were you in?
Grub steak.
Grub steak. Okay.
I won't go into full details on
Yeah.
the evening, but it was tame enough so that we remembered the next day.
So they came up
that
with
was-
Flausching.
That was always a mark of what went on in the bars, and a lot more good ideas were hatched and were remembered the next day. But this one was remembered the next day, and plus I had discovered by then that writing a newspaper for a ski town could really get boring because you're writing the same story every winter, the same set of stories every winter, and trying to make them sound different. That the best way to do a newspaper in a town like that was to write about things that you thought should happen and get people excited about it and get those things to happen. And that was my ulterior motive in wanting to get a good end of the
So the first Flausching was in 69.
69.
Now, let me ask you another question. You were the one who originated that race from Gothic to Crested Butte, right? And I understand that the first race, they were coming into town a little quicker than you thought. So tell us a little bit about what you did for the finish line when somebody yelled, "Here they come."
I had to tell a little bit about why that race started. I had I'd met a few people from the Rocky Mountain Biological Lab, but there'd been a kind of a distance between the lab and the town. And it seemed like they ought to be closer somehow. And there were reasons for that distance, but I like the town and the bugologists, as the town called the biologists, ought to. And so cooked up the race with Chris Johnson, who was director of the lab at that time, as a way of making a sort of a physical connection between the lab and the town. And he thought it was a great idea, and we did it. But the finish. I was in charge of 4th of July that year, and it was such a mob and such a hassle that the next year we didn't even have a 4th of July festival. But that year, Gar Ingraham, whose son was running in the race, came in. He said, "They're approaching the town. Where's the finish line?" I said, "Okay, well, it's going to be right here at 3rd." And I ran into the Stephanics and bought a pound of flour and put down a finish line.
And that's the way it went.
That's the way things went in Crested Butte.
George, let me ask you this. What has given you the most joy in living in Crested Butte for as long as you did?
Well, I think it was the sense that we did actually start making some things happen. The Crested Butte Society should be mentioned. It's a terrible name in a way, although at the time we had other societies in town. We had the Croatian Fraternal Union, the Sylvanian Society, and but the Crested Butte Society was started because we thought what we need to do is to try to create the kind of a community that would be attractive to people like Susan Anderton,
families.
Yeah. And mostly we were really thinking about artists coming to town. And that was, we created a society as a kind of an umbrella organization. Anything you want to do it actually was very much like the creative district that Crested Butte is right now, where you just say, okay, we're going to be a creative place. That means we're going to create things. We're going to make things happen that weren't happening that would be good to be happening in this place. And that wide open and that And that, to me, just being part of a community that was thinking like that, and or had people who were thinking like that.
So great memories
Yeah.
of that. One of the other questions I always wanted to ask you, a lot of people say that Crested Butte is not so much a place as it is a state of mind. I want you to comment on that.
Well, I think one's sense of place is usually also a state of mind. You have decided to adopt this place, or the place has adopted you. I feel like I was adopted by this place. It gave me meaning and purpose in my life. I did come as a ski bum, and I did what ski bums never do. I came back to the same place 2 years in a row, and never left in a sense.
Is there something about Crested Butte in your mind that is unique as opposed to other towns and or ski towns in Colorado?
I think it. I think it has managed to survive without becoming too successful. That probably sounds like a terrible thing to say, but the town has not become another Vail or another Telluride. There are reasons that are independent of us why that is the case, but it remains. Well, there are problems now. The housing and these are serious things that didn't exist when. I mean, I got paid $300 a month on the ski patrol the first year I was here, but I could rent a Dr. Smith house in town for $75 a month.
Let me get to that, what you're talking about right now. There's a tremendous amount of wealth that has come to this town in the last decade.
Mm-hmm.
You got Chad Pike at 11. You got Jeff Hermanson. You've got Mark Walters, the owner of the LA Dodgers. You got North Village. What is that doing to the town? And do you have any concerns about where we're going right now?
Yeah, we're probably on the verge of becoming successful. Too successful, I don't know. Vail owns the ski area. They seem to be pretty mellow about it, but I don't think the money is necessarily making the place a better place to live at all, and I worry about that.
Now, and I want you we'll have to be brief on this because I told you before, you and I I'd like to interview you for about 3 hours on water. You have been involved with water for a long time. There's a great book up here called The Water Wranglers. You've been on the Upper Gunnison River District Board. You've done a lot of talks on water. You had a great article in Harper's Weekly way back when on water. Where do you think we're going with regard to the Colorado River right now, not having enough water in the river to support 40 million people? What's going to happen? And I'm going to give you about 3 minutes.
What's going to happen? Sorry, Dwayne, I can't answer that in 3 minutes. No, fundamentally, we have to use water better, and that is actually happening throughout the basin. Just things like making it mandatory that new construction have water efficient fixtures and appliances has cut urban water consumption about 20%. Most of the water gets consumed in agriculture, and exactly how that's going to shake out, I don't think it's going to make the agricultural people all that happy, but I think their rights will be respected, but they're going to have to be doing some things differently to free up some of that water. doubling the amount of water available for the 40 million people, which will be 50 or 60 million people, according to the Bureau of Reclamation. I doubt that myself, but we'll probably get to 50. Doubling the amount of water that goes to the cities would mean diminishing the amount of water that's used in agriculture by between around 15% maybe. And that ought to be possible.
Let's get to something that's associated with that. What has been the impact of ranching on the Gunnison country? We have 79% of this county that's federal.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of ranches have gone into a conservancy. What has been the impact of ranching on the history of the Gunnison country and Crested Butte?
I think it's been very important. I think of all the I say all, the mining families that worked the mines only until they could buy a piece of ranch land, and it has become what I think of it as a heritage culture rather than an economy. It's you almost have to inherit a ranch in order to be able to ranch and make a living from it. You have to buy the land.
Couldn't do it.
Yeah, you couldn't do it. And so it's a heritage culture, and it's I think important in the valley in the sense of it. A lot of our continuity is there. I think it becomes less and less a factor in the economic life for sure, and in the cultural life too, to a great extent. But I think it's an important heritage culture that.
1 year after you got here, Crested Butte lost the high school. Kids had to go to Gunnison. Tell me the feeling in Crested Butte when that happened.
Oh, it was a great loss. The kids alone, basically the kids never saw the sun at home in the winter. They were up on the bus before the sun was up and come back after the sun. But yeah, it was a terrible loss. It kept the elementary school at least, but the loss of the high school, when a town this size loses its high school, it loses its basketball team and the rallying point for the whole community.
One of the outstanding books you wrote was Part of a Winter. What prompted you to go to Gothic for 4 years?
Looking for cheap housing and a place to develop my writing skills. And Barbara, my wife then, and she was a carver. It seemed like a good idea to. We persuaded the lab that they needed a caretaker, and they said, "Well, you can do it. We can't pay you anything, but you'll have free rent." And that it was a wonderful experience, actually.
This was before Billy Barr.
Yeah, Billy came the second year we were there. He stayed till Christmas that year, and then the next year he was back forever.
Were you there 12 months out of the year?
Yeah, we were after the first summer. First summer they didn't have any cabin space for us, but after that they made room for us, and so we stayed. I became the odd jobber, garbage collector.
Best job you ever had in Crested Butte?
The best job I ever had in Crested Butte? Well, probably ski patrolling on the days when we outnumbered the skiers on the slope. That's hard to beat. And there were only 7 of us on. But I loved the ski patrol work and the skiing. I don't like skiing downhill anymore because they've become so efficient at moving people up the hill that there's always people coming down the hill. And yeah, and the newspaper was a tremendous amount of fun. I really hated selling advertising, and got out of the business because I wanted to write, but I didn't want to sell. I didn't want to run a newspaper. And
Sandy Hickok was here last weekend. She's got all these wonderful photos on the wall of the Crested Butte Museum of the Old Timers, who you knew very well and I knew very well. I want you to tell us all, you know, if there's anything about Crested Butte that kind of sticks in my mind, it's the legacy of the Old Timers. And I want you to comment. What was the legacy and what is the legacy of the Old Timers?
well,
What did they add?
they knew how. Something that Ed Abbey said once, that the real challenge in life is to figure out how to have a rich life without needing a lot of money. They knew how to have a rich life. The ones that we knew, they were people that had been thrown together, and we talk about the melting pot of America. Well, it was really a pressure cooker, and you came in at the bottom. But they had survived. They were families that had survived hard times, and they had kept dancing, kept trying to have a rich life without needing much money, because there wasn't much money for them to have.
Gardens, mushrooms,
Yeah.
dandelion wine, Walrod Gulch on the 4th of July.
Prospecting in the summer on your days off, like Frank Storica kept doing. Yeah, and just keeping on, and trying to do it with friends. And it was a community, and I had never experienced community. I grew up in a little industrial town of about 10,000 people, but I had no experience of what a community is, where people actually are trying to collaborate on how we're going to survive here, and trying to make life as interesting as possible with what we've got.
One of Bob Dylan's famous sayings is, "The times they are a changin'." As you look at Crested Butte in 2023, from 56 years, and you're kind of a philosophical thinker, give me your impressions of where Crested Butte appears to be going right now and what you think the future might hold for Crested Butte.
Well, I think that Crested Butte needs to, the valley needs, the whole, Crested Butte and Gunnison together need to figure out how to deal with the housing problem, the problem of having places for people who want to be here to be here. It's hard to be here now. It was relatively easy to be here when I came here. And so that's something that the town has got. Otherwise, it's going to be a town of with a few trailer parks stashed away somewhere down valley, probably, and people with more money than anyone needs.
It's at a
had their
crossroads.
summers. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're kind of, well, communities are always at crossroads. That's why they're communities, I guess.
Now we got a couple of minutes left, and I wanted to not leave here without you telling us about your experiences as a miner. I know you enjoyed that job very much at the Keystone Mine. Tell you worked in a mine up there a little bit, didn't you? At the Keystone?
No, I never worked there.
I thought you did.
No, I got a guided tour.
Oh, okay, good.
Well,
I was,
and that was when I decided I was really glad to work on Crested Butte Mountain and not in Mount Emmons. I would rather work on the mountains than in them.
Yeah.
It's fine, I mean, when I was on the ski patrol, we worked with shovels more than we skied with shovels more than we skied with poles because we were the slope maintenance people too. But
Well, one final question on the mine. Then the AMAX Red Lady Basin, Mount Emmons, they tell me is the fourth largest and richest deposit of molybdenum in the world. They ever going to mine it?
I kind of doubt it because this is no longer a mining town. It's got a lot of very savvy people who are absolutely dedicated to the fact that there will not be a molybdenum mine there. And molybdenum mostly comes out of copper mines, I guess, because it's something that grows along with copper. But just getting the stuff out of here would be problematic. And it's a rich deposit, but we aren't there yet to where it is absolutely essential for all our mountain bikes and automobiles and such like to have that molybdenum.
George, thank you very much. I think we're out of time, and we are now going to open up to the people who are here. If there are any questions or anybody on Zoom has questions of George Sibley, who's probably the guy to ask questions of. He's been here since 1966, so we got, 57 years in, George. That means you're getting old.
I'm getting old, yeah.
Yes. Yes, sir.
I was wondering what made you think it was a good idea to deliver a baby in Gothic in the wintertime?
Well, the fact of the matter was there was a big road construction project going on that summer, and so we had asked our doctor for what would happen if Barbara's in labor and we're heading down the road and we get stopped at that stop and the baby is coming regardless. And he said, well, I can't give you a lesson in obstetrics. I suggest you come in and have labor induced. And Barbara was really dead set against that. And we went to a new doctor in town, Jay Wolkow, and he said, there's no reason why you couldn't have this baby in Gothic. I'd come up and deliver it if it's a night when I'm not on hospital duty. Well, the baby came on a night, but Gothic also had a doctor there. They had a sort of a rotating set of doctors that stayed in the lab for a week or two, a vacation for them, but they were there to handle any emergencies, and we gave them an emergency. We decided that we were going to have the baby there, and Jay was going to come up and do it. But when we called Jay, he was on hospital duty, so we went to the other doctor, and he came over and took care of the essentials, and it all worked fine.
Another question?
Just a reminder to those that are watching it on Zoom, please put your question in the chat box. We do have one that just came in. George Keith Fulmer is asking, can you talk about getting Botsy to help with the paper?
Giving Botsy a voice was no problem because Botsy loved having a voice. And but Botsy had all these great stories. He was a wonderful storyteller, and it was the smartest thing I did at the newspaper was get Botsy to become my sports editor. The sports were all field sports, hunting, fishing, and mushrooming, and all of that. But he, I was sort of Boswell to his Johnson, in the sense that I would track him down Monday night somewhere around town and get him to tell me a story for his call. What's the column this week? Oh God, is it that time of the week already? Yes, boss, it is. Okay, well, I've been thinking about, and then he'd go off on something, and I would write it down, and so I was sort of his transcriber. But he also was a very enthusiastic peddler of the papers. He would come into the office in the morning and pull out a wad of paper napkins and dollar bills, and okay, I got 2 or 3 new subscriptions last night, and so he built and a lot of people, you know, I knew that a lot of people were buying the paper to read his sporting life columns, and some were buying them to read my editorials, and a lot of them were buying them to read the real estate ads. But I was always hoping that the ones who were buying to read the real estate ads weren't reading the editorials, but maybe reading Botsy because anyway, getting Botsy on the staff was my one stroke of genius as a journalist.
And you're talking about Botsy Spreitzer, and I
Yeah.
think he always started his columns off with captains.
Yep, captains. And
All right, we have another question in the audience.
So at one point you said the community that dances together will take chances together. Talk about dancing, social dancing in Crested Butte.
Good question.
well, I never danced until I came to Crested Butte, and I didn't dance very well when I came to Crested Butte. In fact, Gal Storica took me aside one night and said, "I'm either going to have to kick you out or teach you how to dance right." And he taught me how to dance in a room full of other people without taking over the floor. And that was kind of a learning lesson in my life, that when a room full of people can be dancing and really getting into it and occasionally bumping elbows, but swirling around, and it all works, and that there's something about community in that too, that we're all swirling around in a community, but if we're taking care and being careful to not step on other people's feet any more than occasionally as happens, then we have a community that works. And just like you can have a dance that works, and we have good dances. We have had good dances. Sometimes they get a little crowded at Flushing, but
Frank and Gals, George, was a big dance place.
Mm-hmm.
Grub Steak, I guess.
Frank and Gals was the best.
Yeah.
The best floor for dancing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions in the audience? We have some people just saying hello and they're enjoying the stories and the presentation that we put together. David Waldner says, "What a beautiful gift, George." Tom Speedy and Nancy Verzu say hello. They're enjoying the presentation.
New York.
Hi, Tom and Nancy.
We got Pete Dundon and Susan saying hello too. So they're on the other end. And I'm going to plug the polka
Pete.
party this December at the museum. The 28th of December, we'll be celebrating here the holiday season and having a polka party. So we hope to see you, and you better dance, George.
Yeah, Pete is one of the real gifts in this.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
We have another person saying hello. So it's just been great to see all these people enjoying the presentation. I want to say thank you again to Dwayne and to George for participating in this bright idea that we came up with. We appreciate you both so much and your passion you have for the Valley. We also appreciate our members and our donors here at the Crested Butte Museum. If you're currently not a member, visit our webpage once again at crestedbuttemuseum.com or come in and visit us at the museum. We have a couple celebrations coming up. The first thing is going to be Monday. It's the 50-year celebration. That's going to be taking place up at Elevation from 6 to 8 p.m. So that's Monday, November 6th. And we're going to be basically celebrating the 50th anniversary of the incorporation of Mount Crested Butte. Sandy Cortner will also be there and do a presentation.
Right.
We'll also have a pop-up exhibit featuring artifacts and photographs and showcasing the history. So we look forward to that. And then the next one we have on Wednesday next week will be Sandy Fails, November 8th at 6 p.m. So we look forward to having you join us either in Zoom or in person. And once again, thanks to my staff here at the Crested Butte Museum and everyone for attending. This will be on YouTube within the next few days.
Thank you for the museum too.
Yep.
Music
George,
is
thanks.
great.
That's a wonderful to have you aboard here. Thanks everybody for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, George.